All right, so we've already discussed the types of papers that we use and a brief view of the kinds of pots that we're going to use to do our printing. And so the next step is, well, do we have to prepare those papers, or can we just automatically start bringing in our plants and our papers and get started? Well, the answer is yes, you can go ahead and start with your papers, but you will get better results if you prepare those papers. And you might wonder, well, why? Well, those of you that are from the mixed media world, like I am, you are familiar with getting your papers and sometimes trying to put paint on them, and it just doesn't work. And you're always told, well, you probably need to put some gesso on it. And why do you put gesso on it? Well, you've learned over time that you need some kind of a tooth, some kind of a binder to allow your paint to adhere to a certain type of paper, that maybe the finish or the sheen or whatever it's made of isn't receptive to your paint. So you put the gesso on, and most people will say, oh, it gives it tooth. All right, so if you understand that concept coming from the mixed media world, then it will become very clear to you why you need to put something on the paper before you print on it, to prepare your paper for those prints. Now, a word you're going to come across a lot in the eco dyeing is mordants. Now, what mordants do is the same principle of what the gesso does, in the sense that it prepares the paper for something to adhere to it. Now, all papers are fibrous. They have some kind of a fiber. And I'm not into the dyeing of fabric, but what I've learned is that fabric and dye, or textile and fabrics, they are not readily receptive to dyeing. And so in that world, they all add mordants to their fibers so that it can be receptive. Same thing is for your paper, because it is a fiber and it needs to be conditioned to be receptive to this print that we're doing. All right, so I'm just going to go over just a few of the basic ones. Like I say, this is a beginner's workshop, and there is so much more that I need to learn. There's so much to learn out there on any art that you decide to get involved in, and this is no different. So I will only explain to you things that I've already tried, and then you can experiment from there, as I have done in the past. Okay, so there are some basic mordants out there, and one of them that is easily available is alum. Any of you that have done any kind of canning, you are familiar with this. And also, it's something, if you aren't a canner, which I never have canned anything in my life, but I do have a grocery store, and this is readily available at a grocery store. Another mordant that is used a lot is iron. Now, the way that you can create your mordants is what I did, and I had some rusty tin ceilings, and I had some rusty ones, and you may or may not have seen some of the rust dyeing that I did on some fabric. So I laid the fabric on the rust, and then after it's done printing, then I have to rinse the material out. So I rinsed it, and I said, oh, I have me some iron mordant water that I can use. So I started saving that. But the other way to do it is, if you were just to get some nails and put it in some water with some vinegar and let them rust. And depending on maybe the nails or the screws you put in there or any kind of metal, it may have already had a little bit of rust, and it can rust, as quickly as a day, depending on how much vinegar you put in and how rusty the bits are that you already put in. But that's one way to create this mordant, which is iron. Okay, so we have iron and we have the alum. Now, those are pretty much the two that I have used the most. Now, the other ones that you'll run across in searching for information is they use copper, they use tin, and various things like that. I have only used this. Now, when you start talking to individuals that have experience and that have been involved in this, you're going to get differing opinions concerning using tin and other things like that, because some people feel it's extremely toxic. Well, in my research that I've done, it seems like it's all can be equally toxic. Whether it's the alum, whether it's this, there's an element in there. Because just because something is natural, as we all know, it doesn't mean that it is without some kind of harm or something you have to be careful with. Because, obviously even plants out there, there are some that are poisonous. They're natural, but they're poisonous. So you have to be cautious in all aspects of what you're dealing with when you're doing this particular project. Now, I have found out that the alum doesn't bother me, and the majority of the plants don't bother me. But there is one plant in my yard, and I've kind of figured out it's one of two, so now I stay away from those two. I do not want to test it any further, but I break out just like poison oak or poison ivy with those two plants. I got scratched once or twice, and it just blew up all over. And the poison oak and poison ivy, it's an ivy. It's not going to, poke you. And so this was something else that had some kind of a branch that was strong enough to poke me, and I was extremely allergic to it. Now, another thing that I have found that I don't break out, but I feel like a little sensation in my hands, and it's if I have direct contact with this. So I have learned now that no matter what I do, just to be on the safe side, I always wear gloves. I was the type, especially like in my yard, I hate wearing gloves for anything because I like to feel and touch things. But I learned right away that if I want to pursue this, I need to be cautious and I need to take care of my health. So I decided to wear gloves. Hate it, hate it, hate it, but I do it because I don't want to break out like I did last time. It took like 3 weeks to clear up, and I was miserable. So if you have never used any of these products, I would suggest wearing some type of thin gloves. And if you've already used them and nothing's happened to you, well, that is your decision what you want to do. All right, now another thing that has been used that helps with the bonding of with the print to the paper is some people will use soy milk. And so again, that's something that's readily available that you can use. And I personally have not used it, but many people do. I pretty much have stuck to the alum and to the iron because I've liked the results that I've gotten when I use these. Now the difference between these two is that when you use the alum, it seems to brighten up the print. Like these were done with alum and they're nice and bright, right? Let's see. These were done with alum. And These were done with alum, so that you can see that it gives a brightness to it, right, on the prints. Okay, now these I used the iron, and on these I used the iron. So basically it will darken and give more of a dramatic look when you use the iron. That might be the look that you're looking for sometimes. And then there's other times that you may just want to brighten up the look and have something that isn't as dark. These, even though the print itself is dark, you can see how bright it looks. This was also done with alum. So you have to play around. It has, again, all the variables. It has to do with the kind of paper you do it on, the type of plant you use, if you use a dye bath or not, and if you use your alum or if you use some kind of iron. Now, another way that you can introduce the iron into your dye bath is just by simply putting something old and rusty in the pot. I do that quite often. I have an old chain that if I don't want to deal with this at all, I throw the chain in and I get the same result. So that is just, you know, your own personal preference. All right, so there's two different ways that you can achieve what I would consider a similar look. You can take your papers and you can get a combination. What I like to do is I get one of these and I fill it up with half vinegar, half water, and I put alum. Now, I don't have an exact recipe because I do it different each time, but this here holds 2 ounces, and I will put about half of this into this. I'm not sure the measurement. It doesn't show here how many teaspoons or tablespoons are in here. But anyway, I put about 1 ounce of this into that. All right. Then once I have this solution, I can use it in various ways. One way I can use it is I can get my papers and I can just spray my papers and prepare it that way. Or what I like to do, and I will show examples of that later, I get a little tub, put this mixture in the tub, and then I literally take my leaf and dunk it in and then set it on my papers. So you can do it either way. You can also prepare your papers way ahead of time, and you can dunk your whole papers in this solution, let them dry, and then when you're ready to start a project, your papers are ready and you're all set to go. I personally don't do that because I'm lazy. To me, that's like double work. So I just wait until I'm ready to do my project, and then I either spray my paper or I dunk my leaves. And again, I will illustrate that later on. All right, so those are your basics of what you need to prepare your papers to get going. Now, some of the other things that I add sometimes when I'm doing my prints is I sometimes will sprinkle some curry powder. There is some curry powder in this particular print. I put a little bit of everything on this one so I could show you. Then, because that gives a nice yellow, a nice warm yellow. And then I also like to put this on it, and that is more of the orange color that you see. And then another thing that I like to put is I just get a regular bag of tea, open it up, sprinkle it around, and you can get some of these little darker spots that you see. Now this is really fine. This is cheap, so it's really, really fine. But if you get the nicer tea, the actual pieces of the leaf are in there, it's even nicer because it leaves bigger blotches and it gives a really, really nice effect. Okay, so just as an overview, if you get yourself some distilled white vinegar, which this costs under $1, or you can get yourself some soy milk. These little small ones are inexpensive. Get some nails and make yourself a little bit of rust, and go get yourself a small one of alum. This costs at my local grocery store about $3. So it's good to start with this to see if you like this process. And if you do, then you can get this in bulk, like on Amazon, and per ounce it'll come out a lot cheaper if you get it by the bulk. And that way, if this is something you're going to pursue, it's a cheaper way to go. I have a bunch of these because I found them at a outlet store, and I got these for something like, it was like something super cheap, like 10 cents or something. So I've been still working on these. I still have these, and once those are out, then I think I will get it by the bulk. All right. So the next step is we're actually going to start layering our leaves on our papers and show how we do that and how we bundle them. And I'll be right back with that.